If we look at the basic model of the SDGs, it's a sort of three-corner hat with growth, sustainability and inclusiveness or inclusion. Yes, there is growth, including in least developed countries in Africa, but poverty isn't going away the way we would like it to. And there is a perception based on good research that one of the reasons why poverty remains is that it remains with certain groups. And for example, the Human Development Report 2014 uses the term structural vulnerability. So this is groups which can be clearly defined for one reason or other, that's structural, which are vulnerable because they are excluded. And we can name them: people with disabilities, indigenous people, people who live in remote areas, people who are discriminated against on the basis of religion or caste or ethnicity, and indeed women. If we're going to talk about targeting at all, we can do so on a basis of social inclusion, in the sense that those groups which are being left behind are where we're seeing the residual poverty, and where we have to work if we really are going to try and eradicate poverty. There is one important message in it, which is that it's not a given that social protection programs will deliver social inclusion. They looked at programs in a number of countries in the South Asian region. They found some good results, but a lot that was inconclusive. And indeed, the really strong conclusion they drew from this was that you actually have to, in a very pragmatic and policy-driven way, right from the start, you actually have to put in these social inclusion factors into your planning for social protection measures, so that you're actually taking the right measures to make sure you do include those groups. For example, with indigenous people, which is an area I've worked a lot on in my life, the key issue is often going to be very strongly associated, for example, with environmental questions, because it'll be to do with land tenure, and it'll be to do with pressure on land based on insecure land tenure, and it will be to do with the issue of free, informed and prior consent for example, resource extraction activities and so on. All these things which put pressure on their livelihoods and indeed human rights and lifestyles. Social protection can play a role in making sure that people who are excluded or discriminated against can not be excluded and discriminated against if we get the way we apply our social protection measures right. And this is very, very important, because an awful lot of, especially the sort of targeted social protection, is based on ways of identifying beneficiaries based, for example, on proxy means tests. You set the parameters wrong. You know, you might find you're excluding single mothers, for example, because you've got some parameter which is to do with composition of the family, which mitigates against a single mother with one child who may be extremely poor and very, very needy and extremely vulnerable. And for example, in terms of delivery mechanisms, if you say, in all cases, we are going to make the head of the household, who is male, the recipient of a household targeted benefit. And that benefit is a cash benefit which won't necessarily then be spent for the benefit of all members of the household, then the likelihood of that benefit actually benefiting women and children in that household is going to be far less. If we go beyond social protection to what is DevCo doing with its aid program in general, I mean, it's very clear within the framework of the Agenda for Change and concentration, that bilateral programs are not going to have an awful lot of social protection in them as principal thematic areas. A very small number of the countries in the world will have that, and social inclusion even more so. So these are not areas where we're going to be doing big programming per se. So the case I would like to make coming from this isn't about social protection as a kind of separate subject or social inclusion as a separate subject. It's about the fact that we do need to think about these things in all that we do.